The morning of November 6, 1915 dawns gray and cold over Elkins Park, Pennsylvania. Inside Linwood Hall, the most magnificent private residence on the eastern seaboard, an 80-year-old man lies dying. His bedroom overlooks 300 acres of manicured gardens, fountains imported from France, and stables that once housed 40 thoroughbreds. Through floor-to-ceiling windows draped in silk from lion, he can see the limestone facade of his creation, a temple of wealth that cost $8 million to build, the equivalent of $310 million today. Peter Arrell Brown Widener, one of the richest men in American history, draws shallow breaths. His fortune, estimated at $60 million, equivalent to $2 billion in today's currency, surrounds him. Rembrandt paintings hang in gilded frames. Donatello sculptures stand sentinel in the hallways. Persian rugs, centuries old, cushion the marble floors. 110 rooms sprawl across 100,000 square feet. 20 bathrooms with Italian marble. 55 bedrooms. A ballroom large enough for 1,000 guests. An art gallery that rivals European museums. Gold leaf ceilings. Walls paneled in rare French walnut. A private swimming pool. A bowling alley, its own electrical power plant. Yet as death approaches, Peter Widener knows something the fortune tellers and society columnists do not. This magnificent palace, this monument to the Gilded Age, this last American Versailles, will not remain in his family. The bloodline meant to inherit these halls was severed 3 years earlier, drowned in the frigid waters of the North Atlantic, when the Titanic split in two and sank to the ocean floor. The mansion is already a mausoleum, the fortune already a curse. At 3:47 p.m., Peter Widener's heart stops beating. The servants draw the curtains. The newspapers prepare their obituaries. And Linwood Hall begins its slow, inexorable descent from palace to prison, from monument to ruin, from dream to nightmare. But to understand how a mansion so valuable that even billionaires couldn't keep it came to be, we must travel back 50 years to a city thick with coal smoke and ambition, where a butcher's son is about to discover the secret that will make him one of the most powerful men in America. Philadelphia, 1860. The Civil War has not yet begun, but the city pulses with industrial energy. Smoke rises from foundries. Horses clatter over cobblestones. In a modest brick building on a working-class street, 17-year-old Peter Widener stands behind a butcher's counter, his hands stained with blood, his apron smeared with fat. His father runs the shop. Young Peter was supposed to follow in his footsteps, cutting beef and wrapping pork, earning enough to survive but never enough to escape. But Peter Widener is studying. Not books, people. He watches the wealthy men who come by the finest cuts. He observes how they talk, how they dress, the casual confidence with which they spend money that would feed a working family for months. He sees something these men don't see themselves. They're prisoners of their own habits. They always buy the same cuts. They always come at the same time. They're predictable. And predictable means exploitable. When the Civil War erupts in 1861, most men see tragedy. Peter Widener sees opportunity. The Union Army needs meat. Thousands of soldiers, all needing to eat, and the government willing to pay premium prices to anyone who could supply it. At 17, Widener doesn't have capital, doesn't have connections, doesn't have education, but he has something more valuable. He understands that in times of chaos, the spoils go to those willing to act while others hesitate. He borrows money, calls in favors, promises deliveries he isn't certain he can fulfill, and then he works 20-hour days, negotiating with farmers, coordinating shipments, bribing the right officials, cutting corners where necessary. The meat isn't always the freshest. The weights aren't always accurate, but it arrives on time, and in wartime, reliability matters more than quality. By 1865, when the war ends, Peter Widener has transformed a $50,000 contract into a personal fortune. He's 23 years old, and he's learned the fundamental lesson that will shape the rest of his life. Money doesn't come from working hard. It comes from controlling something everyone needs and no one else can easily provide. He turns his attention to transportation. Philadelphia is growing. Workers need to travel from their homes in the outskirts to the factories downtown. The existing transit system, a hodgepodge of independent horse car lines, is inefficient and expensive. Widener sees a pattern again. Captive customers, fragmented competition, enormous demand. He begins buying up the small transit companies, one by one. When owners resist, he undercuts their prices until they go bankrupt, then buys their assets for pennies on the dollar. When the city government raises objections, he makes generous contributions to political campaigns. When newspapers criticize his tactics, he buys advertising in their pages. By 1875, Peter Widener controls the Philadelphia Traction Company, the dominant transit system in one of America's largest cities. Every worker who rides a trolley to work puts coins in Widener's pocket. Every businessman who commutes from the suburbs enriches him. He's created a machine that generates money while he sleeps. But Widener doesn't stop with transit. He uses his transportation wealth to buy into utilities, gas companies, steel mills. He co-founds U.S. Steel with Andrew Carnegie. He acquires significant holdings in Standard Oil. He becomes a director of American Tobacco Company. By the 1880s, his tentacles reach into every major industry. Newspapers begin calling him the Traction King, but it's a misleading title. He's not just king of transportation. He's an architect of monopoly, a master of the system that would later be called robber baron capitalism. In 1874, he marries Hannah Josephine Dunton, a quiet woman from a respectable family. She gives him 3 sons, George Joseph and Peter Jr. The youngest dies of typhoid at age 11, a tragedy that hardens Widener further. Death, he learns, comes regardless of wealth. But wealth can build monuments that outlast death. His wife Hannah shares his love for beauty, for art, for the trappings of culture that separate the rich from the merely comfortable. Together they begin collecting Renaissance paintings, medieval sculptures, rare books, furniture from French palaces. They travel to Europe, attending auctions, visiting dealers, filling their Philadelphia townhouse with treasures that transform their home into a private museum. But in 1896, tragedy strikes in a way Widener never anticipated. Hannah dies aboard their yacht off the coast of Maine. The official cause is listed as heart failure, but those close to the family whisper about an accident, a fall, a moment of carelessness that stole her life. Widener, now 52, is devastated. The townhouse on Broad Street, once filled with Hannah's laughter and her careful curation of their art collection, becomes unbearable. He needs to escape, to build something new, something that will honor Hannah's memory while asserting his place in history. He owns 300 acres in Elkins Park, rolling hills northwest of Philadelphia. And there, on the highest point, overlooking the landscape like a feudal lord surveying his domain, he decides to build his castle. He summons Horace Trumbauer, a 30-year-old architect who has already designed the Widener family's previous residences. Trumbauer is talented, but improving on a grand scale. Widener doesn't care. He wants someone he can control, someone who will execute his vision without the artistic ego that might interfere. I want something comfortable, Widener tells Trumbauer, a place for my family. But they both know this is a lie. What Widener wants is immortality. He wants a structure so magnificent that 200 years from now, people will walk through its halls and whisper his name with reverence. He wants to surpass the Vanderbilts, the Astors, the Carnegies. He wants his descendants to live in a palace that announces to the world, the Wideners are American royalty. Trumbauer travels to Europe for inspiration. He studies the Prior Park estate in Bath, England. He examines the grand houses of the Italian Renaissance. He returns to Philadelphia with drawings that make Widener's eyes widen. A neoclassical palace, T-shaped, stretching 268 feet long and 215 feet deep. 110 rooms, 55 bedrooms, 20 bathrooms, a ballroom for 1,000 guests, an art gallery with a skylight ceiling, a library that could hold 10,000 books, stables for 40 horses, greenhouses, a power plant, its own reservoir. The cost, $8 million. In 1897, that's an almost incomprehensible sum. It's more than the annual budget of some states. It's enough to build 500 houses for working families. It's Adjusted for inflation, the equivalent of $310 million today. Widener doesn't blink. Begin, he says. Construction starts in 1897. 700 craftsmen descend on the site. Italian stonemasons, French furniture makers, German engineers. The limestone comes from Indiana. Each block cut to precise specifications. The marble for floors is imported from Italy. The wood paneling is French walnut, aged for decades. The ceilings are plastered with intricate moldings, then gilded with 24-karat gold leaf. Every door handle is custom-made. Every window frame is carved. The ballroom alone takes a year to complete, with its walnut panel walls, its fluted columns, its ceiling decorated with filigree plaster and floor motifs. Trumbauer hires a Parisian firm, Jules Allard et Fils, to design the interiors. They bring furniture from the palace of Louis XV, Persian rugs that once graced Ottoman palaces, Chinese pottery that's 800 years old. The breakfast room is paneled in green and white marble, decorated with Gobelin tapestries, worth more than most Americans will earn in a lifetime. The main art gallery is designed with perfect proportions and lighting to showcase Widener's growing collection of masterpieces. But it's the details that reveal the true scale of Widener's ambition. The entrance has 2 sets of doors, one bronze, one clad in gold. The grand hallway features Renaissance-style columns and a central staircase that seems to float in air. There's a hidden half-floor between the first and second levels, lined with built-in cabinetry designed specifically to hold the Widener family's china collection, thousands of pieces worth a fortune. There's a silver vault in the butler's pantry. There's a swimming pool in the basement, surrounded by a squash court. There are secret tunnels beneath the house, running from the main building to the carriage house and gatehouse, allowing servants to move unseen. The grounds are equally extraordinary. Jacques Gribur, a renowned French landscape architect, designs 33 acres of formal gardens, rose gardens, Italian gardens, a massive fountain featuring tritons and nereids, bronze figures that cost more than a working man's house. Long driveways wind through the property, lined with statues and ornamental trees. The estate employs 100 staff members at its peak. Butlers, maids, gardeners, groundskeepers, chauffeurs, stable hands, engineers to maintain the power plant. On December 19, 1899, after only 2 years of construction, Linwood Hall opens its doors. 400 guests arrive for the inaugural gala. They come in horse-drawn carriages. Their formal wear glittering with jewels that could ransom kingdoms. The New York Symphony performs. Opera singer Johanna Gotsky, one of the most famous voices in the world, sings arias that echo through the marble halls. Champagne flows. Waiters circulate with caviar and oysters and delicacies imported from Europe. The guests tour room after room. They're all growing with each new revelation of wealth. Philadelphia society columns gush. The house is described as the last American Versailles. Architectural journals publish spreads. Peter Widener stands in his art gallery, surrounded by his sons, watching the cream of Philadelphia society admire what he's created. And for a moment, the grief of losing Hannah fades. This is his monument. This is his immortality. But monuments, he will soon learn, are also tombs. The years between 1900 and 1912 are Linwood Hall's golden age. Peter Widener, now in his 60s, has become one of the most powerful men in America. His fortune continues to grow. He adds to his art collection obsessively, spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on single paintings. Raphael's small Cooper Madonna hangs in his gallery. Bellini's The Feast of the Gods. 8 Van Dycks. 2 Vermeers. 14 Rembrandts. Gainsborough portraits. Reynolds paintings. Donatello's David sculpture. The collection is so valuable that insurance companies struggle to calculate premiums. The house becomes a social hub for America's industrial elite. William Kissam Vanderbilt visits. Harvey Firestone, the tire magnate. Frank Cyberlin. These men gather in Widener's study, smoking Cuban cigars, drinking French cognac, discussing business deals worth millions. Their wives tour the gardens, admire the art, gossip about society scandals. The ballroom hosts dances where a single evening's entertainment costs more than a factory worker earns in a year. Widener's sons grow into their roles. George Dunton Widener, the eldest, seems destined to inherit everything. He marries Eleanor Elkins, daughter of another wealthy Philadelphia family, cementing alliances in the way aristocracies have for centuries. Together they have 3 children, including a son named Harry Elkins Widener. Peter's beloved grandson, Joseph, the second son, is quieter, more scholarly, but equally devoted to the family legacy. Peter Widener sits at the head of his dining table, in a room that seats 30 guests comfortably, and looks at his family gathered around him. George, Eleanor, the grandchildren, Joseph. This is what wealth is for, he thinks. Not the art, not the architecture, but this, the continuation of the bloodline, the perpetuation of the name, the knowledge that after his death, the Wideners will remain powerful for generations. In 1912, Peter decides his family needs a vacation. George and Eleanor, along with their son Harry, plan a trip to Europe. They'll tour the continent, attend the opera in Paris, visit art dealers in London, buy more treasures for Linwood Hall. For their return journey, they book passage on a new ship, the most luxurious ocean liner ever built, the RMS Titanic. It's scheduled to make its maiden voyage from Southampton to New York in April. Peter Widener, feeling too old for the journey, stays home. It's a decision that will save his life and haunt him forever. On April 10th, 1912, the Titanic departs Southampton. George and Eleanor Widener are in first-class accommodations, some of the finest suites on the ship. Their 27-year-old son Harry is with them, excited, full of life. George Widener has a major shareholder in International Mercantile Marine Company. The parent company of White Star Line has special status aboard the ship. He knows Captain Edward Smith personally. On April 14th, the night before they're scheduled to arrive in New York, George hosts a dinner party in the ship's first-class dining room. It's a lavish affair. Oysters, caviar, French wines, roasted duck, the finest cuisine the Titanic's kitchens can produce. Captain Smith attends as the guest of honor. The dinner ends around 10 p.m. George and Eleanor retire to their suite. Harry goes to the ship's library, browsing rare books he's excited to add to the collection he's building at Harvard, where he's a student. The Titanic steams to the North Atlantic at 22 knots, racing to set a speed record for the crossing. At 11:40 p.m., Lookout Frederick Fleet spots something in the darkness. An iceberg. He rings the warning bell 3 times. First Officer William Murdoch orders the engines reverse, the helm turned hard to port. It's too late. The iceberg scrapes along the starboard side of the Titanic, tearing open 6 compartments below the waterline. The ship, declared unsinkable by its designers, has just received a mortal wound. Water pours into the lower decks. The Titanic begins to list. Passengers, most still in their night clothes, emerge confused onto the deck. The crew begins loading lifeboats, but there's a problem. The ship carries lifeboats for only half its passengers. It's a cost-cutting measure, a decision made because extra lifeboats would clutter the promenade decks and detract from the ship's aesthetic beauty. George Widener helps Eleanor into Lifeboat 4. She begs him to come with her. He refuses. Women and children first, he says, adhering to the code of conduct expected of wealthy gentlemen. He promises he'll find space on another boat. Eleanor, not comprehending the full scope of the disaster, agrees. She watches as the lifeboat is lowered into the freezing Atlantic. George returns to the ship, looking for Harry. He finds his son on the deck, standing near the grand staircase, calmly smoking a cigarette. They wait together for rescue, still believing the Titanic cannot actually sink. That help will arrive in time. Other lifeboats launch, half empty because the crew is incompetent, because passengers don't understand the urgency, because until the very end, most people aboard the Titanic refuse to believe they're about to die. At 2:20 a.m. on April 15th, 1912, the Titanic's stern rises out of the water. The ship breaks in 2. The forward section sinks immediately. People scream. The orchestra, which has been playing on deck to keep passengers calm, finally stops. The stern section floats for a few more seconds, then slides beneath the waves. George and Harry Widener are aboard when it goes down. The water temperature is 28 degrees Fahrenheit. Human beings can survive in water that cold for approximately 15 minutes before hypothermia causes unconsciousness and death. George and Harry, if they survived the initial plunge, likely died within minutes. Their bodies are never recovered. Eleanor Widener, sitting in Lifeboat 4, watches the Titanic disappear. She watches the searchlights go dark. She hears the screams of 1,500 people freezing to death in the Atlantic, and she knows her husband and son are among them. News of the Titanic disaster reaches Philadelphia on April 15th. Initial reports are confused, contradictory. Some newspapers claim everyone was saved. Others report significant casualties, but insist all first-class passengers survived. Peter Widener, reading these accounts in his study at Linwood Hall, clings to hope. George and Eleanor had the best accommodations. They would have been among the first to board lifeboats. They'll be fine. Then the passenger manifest of survivors is published. Eleanor's name appears. George and Harry's names do not. Peter Widener is 80 years old. He has built an empire. He has created one of the finest art collections in the world. He lives in a palace that will stand for centuries, and none of it matters. His eldest son, his grandson, his heirs are gone, drowned in the Atlantic. Their bodies somewhere at the bottom of the ocean, 2.5 miles down, unreachable, unrecoverable. The funeral service is held at Linwood Hall on April 20th, but there are no bodies to bury. Instead, the family erects cenotaphs, empty monuments to the dead. Peter Widener sits in the front row of mourners, his face a mask, his eyes empty. People whisper about how well he's handling it, how stoic he is. They don't understand. He isn't stoic. He's hollow. The core of him has been carved out. Eleanor returns to Linwood Hall, a widow at 36. She moves to the mansion like a ghost, unable to bear the memories. Every room reminds her of George, of Harry, of the life she was supposed to have. Within months, she moves out, unable to stay in a house where she was supposed to grow old with her husband. Peter Widener closes the library, the room where Harry spent so much time browsing the rare book collection. He converts it into a ballroom, a space for parties, for life, for anything except the quiet solitude where his grandson once sat reading. It's an act of denial, of attempting to overwrite memory with activity. But the damage is done. The succession plan is shattered. George was supposed to inherit Linwood Hall. George was supposed to continue building the Widener empire. George's sons were supposed to carry the name forward for generations. Now that future is erased. Peter's remaining son, Joseph, is 45 years old, scholarly, more interested in art than business. He'll inherit by default, but it's not what Peter intended. The mansion continues to function. The staff maintains the grounds. The art collection grows. Peter Widener commissions John Singer Sargent, the most famous portrait painter of the era, to paint his portrait. In the painting, completed in 1903, Widener sits in his study, surrounded by his treasures, wearing a dark suit, his expression serious but not unkind. It's the portrait of a man who has conquered the world and discovered that conquest is hollow. Peter Widener's health declines. He suffers from what his doctors vaguely describe as nervous exhaustion, but everyone close to him knows the truth. He's dying of grief. The mansion, once filled with laughter and music and the energy of a rising dynasty, becomes quiet. Fewer parties, fewer guests, just the old man, his remaining son, and the ghosts of those who were supposed to be there. On November 6, 1915, 3 years after the Titanic sank, Peter Orell Brown Widener dies in his bedroom at Linwood Hall. He's 80 years old. His fortune is estimated at $60 million. His art collection is priceless. His mansion is one of the wonders of the Gilded Age. None of it could save his son or grandson. None of it could give him the dynasty he dreamed of. In his final moments, looking out at the gardens of fountains, the palace he built to house generations of Wideners, he knows the truth. Linwood Hall is already dying. It was killed the night the Titanic sank, 3 years before his own heart stopped beating. Joseph Widener inherits everything: the mansion, the art collection, the fortune, the responsibility. He's 48 years old, unmarried, with no interest in the social circus his father and brother thrived in. He's a scholar, a collector, a man who would rather spend his days studying Renaissance paintings and hosting parties for Philadelphia society, but he honors his father's vision. He opens Linwood Hall's art gallery to the public by appointment from 1915 to 1940. It becomes a pilgrimage site for art lovers. Museum curators make the journey to Elkins Park to see treasures at rival collections in Europe: the Raphael, the Rembrandts, the Vermeers, the Donatello sculptures. It's reported that Joseph spends hours each day in the gallery, simply looking at the paintings, as if trying to decode some message his father left behind. Joseph makes changes. He hires Jacques Gribur, son of the original landscape designer, to redesign the gardens in French style in 1916. He builds extensive kennels on the property starting in 1920, becoming a passionate dog breeder. During World War II, the grounds are used for training military dogs. These modifications give the estate a new purpose, but they can't hide the underlying truth. The house is too big, too expensive, too much for one man. The maintenance costs are staggering. 100 staff members, heating 110 rooms through Pennsylvania winters, maintaining 33 acres of formal gardens, repairing the roof, which is the size of a small town, updating the electrical system, the plumbing, the endless, grinding expenses that come with maintaining a palace. Joseph pays these costs because he can. His inherited fortune generates enough income to support the house indefinitely, but he's also watching the world change. The Great Depression arrives in 1929. Across America, mansions are being shuttered, abandoned, demolished. The Gilded Age is ending. The era of massive private estates maintained by armies of servants is collapsing under its own weight. Income taxes are rising. Labor costs are increasing. The social acceptance of extreme wealth is eroding. Joseph recognizes that Linwood Hall is becoming an anachronism. When his father built it, such displays of wealth were celebrated. Now they're increasingly seen as obscene, as symbols of inequality that help cause the economic collapse devastating the nation. He begins thinking about the future, about what will happen to the house and its treasures when he dies. He has no children, no obvious heirs. His brother George's surviving children, Eleanor's daughters, have no interest in maintaining Linwood Hall. They've built their own lives, far from the shadow of the Titanic tragedy. Joseph realizes that when he dies, the estate will likely be broken up, sold off, dismantled. In 1942, he makes a momentous decision. He donates the entire art collection, more than 2,000 pieces, to the National Gallery of Art in Washington, D.C. The Raphael, the Rembrandts, the Vermeers, the Donatello sculptures, all of it. The collection his grandfather Peter spent decades assembling. The collection that defined Linwood Hall's identity as the house that art built. The donation is valued at multiple millions of dollars. It transforms the National Gallery overnight into one of the world's premier art museums. But it also strips Linwood Hall of its soul. The galleries are empty now. The walls that once held Renaissance masterpieces show only the faded rectangles where frames hung for decades. The house is hollow, a shell, a stage set without actors. Joseph Widener dies on October 26, 1943, at age 76. With his death, the Widener dynasty ends. He leaves the mansion to his heirs, but none of them want it. The southern portion of the estate, hundreds of acres, is sold for development. The formal gardens begin to decay. The staff is dismissed. Linwood Hall sits empty, waiting for someone to decide its fate. In 1948, a developer purchases a mansion for $130,000, equivalent to about $1.7 million today. It's an absurdly low price for a property that cost $8 million to build in 1897. But the developer isn't buying it for its architectural value. He's buying it to demolish it, to subdivide the land, to build suburban houses for the post-war housing boom. Then something unexpected happens. Before demolition can begin, the developer defaults on his mortgage. The property reverts briefly to the Widener estate. Another buyer steps forward. Faith Theological Seminary, an evangelical Christian organization, purchases Linwood Hall in 1952 for $192,000, equivalent to $2.3 million today. The seminary sees opportunity. They can train ministers in a palace. They can house students in rooms that once accommodated Philadelphia society. They can use the ballroom for worship services. It seems like a perfect adaptive reuse, a way to preserve the building while giving it new purpose. But the seminary lacks the resources to properly maintain the mansion. Within years, they begin selling off pieces. The furniture, the walnut paneling from the walls, the marble mantels, the rare tapestries. Anything that can be removed and sold is removed and sold. In 2006, the Grieber Fountain, one of only 2 major Grieber commissions remaining in America, is sold at auction. The house is being cannibalized, stripped of everything valuable to keep the seminary financially afloat. The gardens become overgrown. The greenhouse glass shatters and is never replaced. The stables collapse. The swimming pool fills with debris. The secret tunnels flood. Room by room, Linwood Hall deteriorates. Plaster falls from ceilings. Water damage spreads across walls. The gold leaf detailing tarnishes. The marble cracks. By the 1990s, the seminary is in financial crisis. They can't afford the property taxes. Can't afford heating oil for Pennsylvania winters. Can't afford basic maintenance. In 1996, the First Korean Church of New York purchases a property as share of sale. They have visions of turning it into a church and seminary, continuing the religious mission, but they fare no better. The costs are overwhelming. The building is now actively decaying. Sections of roof leak. Basement areas flood. Asbestos, installed during earlier renovations, contaminates multiple rooms. The church applies for permits to renovate, to convert spaces, to make the building functional. All applications are denied by local zoning boards. Legal battles drag on for years. By the early 2000s, Linwood Hall is essentially abandoned. The Korean church maintains minimal security, but vandals break in regularly. Graffiti appears on walls. Windows are smashed. Copper plumbing is stolen. The once magnificent palace becomes a target for urban explorers, photographers fascinated by ruin porn, and thieves looking for anything remaining of value. In 2003, Linwood Hall is added to the Preservation Alliance for Greater Philadelphia's list of endangered historic properties. The designation brings attention but no money. Architectural historians publish articles lamenting the mansion's decay. Documentaries are filmed showing its deteriorating grandeur, but no one with the resources to save it steps forward. The Korean church, drowning in debt and property taxes, lists the mansion for sale in 2014. Initial asking price, $20 million. No buyers. They reduced the price to $17.5 million in 2017. Still no buyers. They reduce it again to $16.5 million. Then $11 million in 2019. Even at these drastically reduced prices, which represent a fraction of what it would cost to replicate the building, no one is willing to take on the burden. The problem isn't the purchase price. It's what comes after. A 2014 estimate suggests it would cost $50 million to restore Linwood Hall to livable condition. $50 million to fix the roof, repair the plaster, remediate the asbestos, update the electrical and plumbing systems, restore the gardens, rebuild the damaged interiors. And after spending that $50 million, the owner would face annual maintenance costs of hundreds of thousands of dollars. Property taxes, heating and cooling 100,000 square feet, staffing, security, insurance. The mansion has become what economists call a white elephant, an asset so expensive to maintain that it destroys its owner. Even billionaires look at Linwood Hall and calculate the financial hemorrhaging required to keep it alive, and they walk away. The mansion is too valuable to demolish, protected by historic preservation laws, but too expensive for anyone to save. Years pass. The roof continues to leak. Ceilings collapse. In what was once Peter Widener's private bedroom, the magnificent wood paneling is stripped away and sold off in the early 2000s, leaving bare walls scarred with nail holes. The swimming pool, once a marvel of modern engineering, fills with stagnant water and debris. The bowling alley and billiard room in the basement, spaces where Gilded Age servants once relaxed, are contaminated with asbestos and unsafe to enter. Yet amidst the decay, traces of grandeur persist. The grand staircase, though damaged, still commands the entrance hall. The ballroom's gold leaf ceiling, though tarnished, still catches light. The reception room, completed in 1915 in Louis XV style, still displays its 24-karat gilding. One bathroom retains its marble bathtub and mirrored alcove, a ghost of luxury. The massive empty art gallery, stripped of its paintings, still has its skylight ceiling intact, though the glass is broken in places. In 2021, photographer Leland Kent is granted access to document the mansion. His photographs go viral, shocking viewers with a contrast between the building's obvious magnificence and its heartbreaking deterioration. The images circulate on social media, in architectural publications, in news articles. They generate outrage. How could America allow such a treasure to rot? How could one of the most significant Gilded Age mansions be abandoned? But outrage doesn't pay for restoration. Outrage doesn't fix leaking roofs or remediate asbestos or repair crumbling plaster. The mansion continues to decay, locked in a death spiral where each year neglect makes restoration more expensive, which makes finding a buyer less likely, which guarantees another year of neglect. The secret tunnels beneath the house flood and fill with debris. The carriage house and gatehouse, once matching architectural gems, fall into ruin. The Italian gardens, the rose gardens, the formal paths designed by Jacques Reber, all disappear beneath overgrowth. Wild vegetation reclaims the 300 acres, nature slowly erasing the landscape that required 100 gardeners to maintain. By 2022, Linwood Hall has been abandoned, more or less, for 26 years. It's been 70 years since the Widener family lived there. It's been 110 years since the Titanic sank. The mansion stands as a monument to multiple American tragedies. The hubris of the Gilded Age, the senseless loss of life in the Titanic disaster, the impossibility of preserving private palaces in a modern economy, the failure of systems meant to protect historic landmarks. And then, unexpectedly, hope arrives. In July 2022, a nonprofit organization is formed with a single mission: save Linwood Hall. The Linwood Hall Preservation Foundation is led by Scott Bentley, a founding partner of Bentley Systems and a historic preservation enthusiast. The foundation raises $9.5 million, primarily from Bentley's personal donation, to purchase the estate from the Korean church and begin emergency stabilization. On June 27, 2023, the sale finalizes for $9 million. For the first time in decades, Linwood Hall has an owner committed to restoration rather than demolition or exploitation. The foundation's vision is ambitious: restore the mansion to its 1915 glory and open it to the public as a cultural center, museum, and educational venue. They project the full restoration will cost upwards of $90 million and take years to complete. The foundation begins with the most urgent needs. They clear the overgrown gardens, revealing original pathways that have been hidden for 80 years. They stabilize the roof to prevent further water damage. They begin remediation of the asbestos contamination, a process that will cost $1.2 million alone and take 4 to 5 months. They restore electricity to the lighting in the art gallery for the first time in decades. They document every room, creating detailed plans for systematic restoration. Phase 1 focuses on critical systems: roof repair, structural stabilization, asbestos removal, grounds restoration. Estimated cost: $30 million. Phase 2 will address building restoration and the French gardens, $25 million. Phase 3 will complete interior restoration and conversion to museum use, $40 million. In September 2023, the music video for Come On Heartache by the Menzingers is filmed at Linwood Hall, bringing cameras and crew into spaces that haven't seen activity in decades. In November, Preservation Pennsylvania awards the foundation its Turning Point Award, recognizing the effort to save the mansion. The hidden half-floor above the butler's pantry, boarded up for 60 years, is rediscovered and photographed, revealing intact built-in cabinetry designed to hold the Widener china collection. The billiard room in the basement, where servants once relaxed, is assessed for restoration once the asbestos is removed. The swimming pool is drained and cleaned for the first time since the 1950s. The underground tunnel system is explored and documented. In September 2024, another piece of the story comes full circle. A portrait of Peter A.B. Widener, painted by John Singer Sargent in 1903 at Linwood Hall, is sold by his great-great-great-grandson Peter R. Widener to Stephen Schwartzman, CEO of Blackstone Group. A portion of the sale proceeds, worth millions of dollars, is donated to the Linwood Hall Preservation Foundation. The portrait leaves the family after 121 years, but its sale helped save the house where it was created. Today, Linwood Hall stands at a crossroads. The foundation has prevented its immediate collapse, but years of hard work remain. Rooms that once hosted Vanderbilts and Firestones are still empty shells. The ballroom that could hold 1,000 guests still needs restoration. The gardens require years of replanting. The art gallery that once held Raphael and Rembrandt masterpieces is bare. But for the first time in 70 years, the trajectory is upward. The mansion is no longer dying. It's being reborn, slowly, expensively, against enormous odds, but being reborn nonetheless. The irony isn't lost on anyone paying attention. Peter Widener built Linwood Hall to house generations of his family, to create a dynasty that would last centuries. The Titanic destroyed that dream in a single night. The mansion stood for a century, through wars and oppressions and social upheavals, but no billionaire could maintain it. No family wanted it. It took a nonprofit foundation, committed to preserving history rather than private wealth, to finally save it. In the end, Linwood Hall's survival required the opposite of what Peter Widener intended. He built it as a private palace. It's being saved as a public trust. He filled it with art he owned. It will be filled with visitors who will share it. He wanted his descendants to live there forever. It will be a place where everyone's descendants can visit and learn. The mansion that was too valuable for even billionaires to keep will survive by belonging to no one, and therefore to everyone. Stand in the grand entrance hall today, and you can feel both what was and what might be. The bronze and gold doors still guard the entrance. The Renaissance columns still frame the space. The central staircase still leads upward. Through windows that need repair, you can see gardens beginning to recover their formal patterns. In rooms where plaster is falling, you can still spot traces of gold leaf catching the light. This is what remains when dynasties die. Not the fortune, which is redistributed and spent and taxed away. Not the family name, which fades from memory within a few generations. But the architecture, the physical space, the monument to ambition and loss, and the passage of time. Peter Widener died believing he had failed. His son and grandson drowned before inheriting his empire. His great mansion fell into decay. His dream of dynasty was crushed by an iceberg and a century of change he couldn't anticipate. But he succeeded in ways he never imagined. Linwood Hall stands. Chain damaged but standing. The art collection he assembled is in the National Gallery, seen by millions rather than hoarded by one family. The mansion will open to the public, teaching future generations about the Gilded Age, about architecture, about the cost of extreme wealth, about the night the Titanic sank and changed everything. The Titanic took 1,500 lives in a single night. Among them were a father and son who should have inherited a palace. Their deaths transformed Linwood Hall from a home into a museum, from a private dream into a public legacy, from a monument of dynasty into a memorial for all dynasties that rise and fall and leave only stone behind. The mansion, so valuable even billionaires couldn't keep it, survives precisely because it was too valuable to destroy. Too beautiful. Too historically significant. Too much a part of American history. Its survival required that it be transformed from private property into shared heritage, from one family's palace into everyone's inheritance. On a cold November morning, similar to the morning Peter Widener died, visitors will someday walk through Linwood Hall's bronze and gold doors. They'll climb the central staircase. They'll stand in the ballroom where 1,000 guests once danced. They'll look at the empty frames on the gallery walls and imagine the Rembrandts that hung there. They'll walk gardens that took armies of gardeners to maintain. And if they listen carefully, they might hear the echoes. Champagne glasses clinking at parties in 1905. The New York Symphony playing at the opening gala in 1899. Peter Widener's footsteps crossing marble floors as he surveys his creation. George and Harry's laughter before they boarded the Titanic. The silence of abandonment. The hammers and saws of restoration. This is the mansion's final transformation. From butcher son's dream to billionaire's palace to abandoned ruin to preserved landmark. From monument to one family's ambition to memorial for all who dream of permanence and discover that stone endures longer than dynasties, that buildings outlast the families who build them, that in the end, the only immortality is becoming part of a story larger than yourself. Linwood Hall is no longer the Widener family's home. It belongs to history now. And history, unlike fortunes, cannot be taxed or spent or divided among heirs. History is an inheritance we all share, built from the ruins of private dreams that became public treasures. The mansion so valuable even billionaires couldn't keep it will stand for another century, saved by the one thing Peter Widener never considered, that sometimes the only way to preserve what you love is to give it away.